sorry. I'm so sorry.
Not even a warning.
Yeah, no warning again.
You know what? It tells me when I click it, it says like 60-second warning, and then everyone just disappears.
Presentation now, so.
So I'm sorry. The last time actually, it said like I could see the 60-second warning. I clicked it. I feel like no one got the announcement.
No.
I watched it tick
We
down. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Canadian.
Where's
Hi guys.
Where's the
I
wine?
got my wine. Maybe actually before let's do all like a big WCA cheers before I introduce our speakers for the night. So if you've joined us, thank you so much. Raise your glass, whether it's wine or water or tea or whatever. Woo! Thanks for joining.
Cheers.
So I'm pretty excited to introduce our speakers
up
for the evening.
What happened to Gary doing the housekeeping?
Gary's somewhere around here. But for now, you're stuck with me. Okay, so we've got Doug and Lisa joining us tonight. I'm going to ask that. I'm sorry. I'm going to ask
Everybody mute, please.
Yeah, so either mute or I'm going to be forced to mute everyone, which I hate doing. So if you guys could just pause conversation for a moment while I introduce our two speakers, which are Doug and Lisa.
You muted yourself, Mikhail.
Okay, there. Can you still hear me now? Great. Okay, so Doug and Lisa have been members of the WCA for 35 years now, longer than I've been alive, I will admit. During this time, they've coordinated events, outings, and the Outdoor Adventure Show, and Doug has served on the board for 7 years. They're well known for their Grand River annual event, which they've been doing for the last 12 years. And the event has brought out many people over the years for an enjoyable paddle and social gathering in the Cambridge area. I'm sure plenty of you have joined that event yourselves. Both of their sons have embraced the outdoors and have led trips on their own. And recently they enjoyed passing on their paddling passion to their 2-year-old granddaughter, who did her first canoe trip in Algonquin this year. Yay. Oh my goodness. Today they're going to be talking to you guys about their trip to the Quetico, which is a place that's on my bucket list personally, and I'm sure probably on the bucket list of many people here, and just everything that went down, how they organized it, like basically all the logistics behind it and how great of a trip it was. So let's give them a round of applause to begin their presentation. Woo!
Thanks, Michaela, and welcome all. It's great to be out here. You know, I really want to first put a little plug in for the WCA here. And as Michaela said, we've been around for a very, very long time with the organization, and we're just in the breakout rooms. And there's people that have been around for a couple of years. Some have been around for a very, very long time that we recognize here. But you know, we're in really challenging times right now, and you know, the great trips that people have done. I was thinking, what a wonderful idea to put together something, you know, virtually like this, because we're into this for a while, and it's just a great opportunity to keep the membership going, you know, keep people engaged in the love of the wilderness. We will get out on our own trip, but you know, as a paddling community with the WCA, we don't get that same opportunity. So it's wonderful. Even today at 10 o'clock, I was on with the hot tanning. I don't think Luigi's on tonight, but we ended up having a nice seminar on hot tanning. It got the wheels turning with me. Looking forward to the winter tripping that I'm going to be doing, and some changes that I'm going to make to the setup of things. So it's a big thing to move forward with that. You know, when I first connected with Gary on this idea of doing this particular presentation, I sort of thought, oh, hang on a second here. You know, all we did was go up to Quetico and eat wine and cheese, and we end up being there. You know, you hear these presentations of someone summiting the Everest, or doing, you know, 6 months in the Arctic, or doing a first descent down a river or something like that. But you know, this is an average trip, really, if you really think about it. But then I started thinking about a symposium that I went to, the WCA put on many years ago, and it was titled "The Near North." And when I went to this seminar and listened to the speakers at it, what drew me so much to it was these were all achievable trips. These were places that I could get to. I'm not going to spend 6 months crossing the Arctic. I'm not going to climb Everest. But these were places that, you know, I later on started to research more and thought these would be great places to go, and ended up hitting some of those that were on the list. So with this one tonight, it's like that, right? It's the trip that's you know, accessible. It's out. Everyone was on at 4 o'clock this afternoon. We're doing a little test with the Zoom, and Glenn White, and I think he's on here tonight. He was mentioned that he was in Quetico in the summer. So some of you may have been to Quetico before. Is maybe hopefully want you to return. Others you may not have been, and hopefully it'll go on your list as some place that you will you want to go. So I'll see if I can open up this first presentation here. I'm going to share my screen, and Michaela, you can tell me that things are working okay here. Oops, hang on a second here. Oops, that's not what I want.
Here's quite a cool presentation.
Yeah.
A desert in Quetico.
Yeah,
Different
but nothing from my end.
Okay, we got that, Michaela?
You
Yep.
got the-
So one thing
Sure.
defaults to a speaker view or gallery view. You can choose speaker view and you only see Doug and Lisa, or you can have gallery view and you see the first 5, 6 people. It's up to you. How to select that? It's up on the top right corner of your screen. There's a little 9-box view.
Yeah, up here.
Standard
View,
side-by-side speaker or side-by-side gallery.
side by speaker or side by side gallery.
I like it this.
And also keeping people on mute so that we don't have the background noise. That'd be appreciated. Fabulous. Okay, great. So this is not a mistake. This is actually where we were supposed to be in August of 2020. We had spent a long time organizing to do a trip on the Nahanni, and so we're going to be going with Nahanni Wild, and everything was set up. We had made all kinds of preparation for that, and we contacted them just after COVID started, and they said, well, it's months away. This will be long gone by then. We should be fine. There won't be any issue with it. And then the months went by, and then come around June, we got a phone call from them and said, well, I don't think we're going to make this thing happen. So we had blocked off a couple of weeks already to do this trip. Lisa had taken time off work. I blocked the time off as well. So we were sitting with 2 weeks of time that we had and trying to figure out what to do. Lisa came up with the idea that, you know, we've always wanted to do Quetico. It's always been on our list, but we haven't gone there because it's a 4-day trip, going 2 days up, 2 days back, consumes a lot of time. So, you know, it just didn't work out time-wise for us, even though we did want to go. So we ended up making the decision that we would end up going up to Quetico, which was great. And so we ended up with the decision to go up there. And, you know, for those of you who have been there, I think you'll agree with me that it's a very, very unique place to go. And the reason I say that is it is a park, but when you think of Algonquin, Killarney, that type of thing, it's not that. It's truly a wilderness park, and it is a park that is managed, yet you can go anywhere you want. You can camp anywhere you want. You're not bound to any route whatsoever. There's no campsite signs. There's no portage signs at all. And there's no thunderboxes. So it is basically, you know, crown land in a sense. It's even better than that because you don't have ATVs running through it or anything else that can get in there. So it is truly a, you know, a wilderness, you know, location out there. On the map here, you see where it is. It is a long day, a long traveling 2 days. You're going up to Quetico there, past Thunder Bay. It's right on the border of the U.S. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But we ended up deciding to do it as a 2-day trip. First was going to be up in Wawa, right here where the big goose is. And then moving over to Quetico and getting there for our second day with the intention to put in on the following day. So in putting this together and figuring you know, things out, had to come up with some ideas about how we would do this trip. So fortunately we're very well connected within the WCA and outside, and got a chance to pull up a bunch of articles on things. I see Bill King's on here, and we actually saw your article from I think 1986, maybe somewhere around there. Yeah, and I read your article about going in there with your boys, right? And it was a really interesting read, because knowing you guys and reading that, it was quite funny to read it. So that was quite cool. Do you guys remember that trip?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny reading it, because there's a lot of Americans that you ended up coming across at different sites and stuff like that. Well, this was quite the opposite experience that we ended up having. So when in looking at the map, I came up with this idea from all these articles. And by the way, I ended up contacting Gary James, and he was a tremendous resource of information. He's a very organized person who collects all of this material for the library, and he was able to give me a complete package of everything that he had for Quetico, and he had been up there. So I got a lot of information from him, and started putting things together, and had the idea that we would end up putting in the north end, and we would end up creating a loop. In looking at this though, and trying to figure this loop up, I learned about this area called the Falls Chain, and it's down here 73 on the map. And this, everything I read about it was a real spectacular area. It's a highlight of the park, and it's an area that I wanted to get to. But getting down there was going to end up taking a lot of time, and then getting back. And there's no way we could do it in the 8 days that we had. So I ended up almost scrubbing the idea of getting into it until.
Well, as part of the planning, Doug had tasked me with making arrangements for pre and post trip accommodations. So I had a look at Quetico, which is the nearest town, and the motels there looked far less than appealing. So I kept searching, and I came up with Camp Quetico, and their website looked good. Gave them a quick call, no problem. They got us a room. So I thought it would be a good idea maybe to check the TripAdvisor reports about Camp Quetico. And while I was checking the reports, I found one that mentioned that they used Camp Quetico as their accommodation prior to their flight into Quetico. So I called the resort back and talked to Barry and Tammy, who run Camp Quetico, and they referred us to somebody called Fern at Sapawe Airlines, which in normal years accommodates all sorts of fly-in fishing to Kashabowie outpost fishing camps. So, but they also fly into Quetico. So we easily were able to book a flight so that we could, in our time frame, get ourselves down to Doug's beloved Falls Chain, and still be able to make it back to our takeout in time.
So problem solved. It was great. So we had an idea of a route that we could end up doing, and we ended up contacting this woman by the name of Lisa, who is a park ranger at Quetico, and she was incredible on the phone. She we spent probably 30-40 minutes going to a lot of great insight into the park. Everything from locations to pictographs, things to look out for, areas of high winds, things need to be conscious of with bears, and all of this type of thing. One thing she did share with us was that, because I asked her, well, how busy can we expect it to be in there? She says, she laughed, and she says, not at all. She says, the park right now is at about 20% of what it typically is. She says, it's almost, in normal times, it's so heavily inundated by Americans that come up from the south and come into the park, and as well from the north, but we don't have that right now. So what she said is that, especially flying into the south end, you're probably not going to see anyone at all for quite a number of days until you get into the northern part of the park. So I thought, this is great. This is absolutely fabulous. We're going to hopefully end up having some great solitude, going into this this park into that area. So we came up with this route then, and the route had us fly in. It doesn't want to advance. Okay, stand by, technical things here. I'm going to go out of this PowerPoint and come back into it. Maybe I'm not.
escape. Yeah,
Oh,
start.
there we are. I got it. I think I got it. Okay. Yeah, here we go. We're good. Okay, so it started down in Cache Bay. So that's where we would fly into. And
Bottom right of your screen.
yeah, and we would work our way up through some falls and then get us into the falls chain. Coming up into the falls chain, this is the area that I really wanted to get to, which would take us through all of these falls all the way through here, and then get up into Kaunipi Lake. Now, Kaunipi is a very large lake, and it covers, you know, and we're already warned that this can be a little bit challenging if there are winds. So it was something, you know, on our mind going into the trip, you know, with it. And then from there, it's not advancing here for some reason.
Oh, it's changing now.
So from there, it went up. What's that?
It changed.
Okay, so from there, yeah, I'm not too sure why it was stopping there. I don't know. We went through it earlier and it was no issue with it whatsoever. They're getting into some small through some more falls areas at all. And there's some people trying to get in here, Gary, to be admitted.
I'll let him in.
And up through a really interesting falls area, and then back up through like once they could get us into Bachuan Bay up into Nim Lake. So the total distance was going to be 120 kilometers and had 9 kilometers of portage. Now we were doing doubles, which meant that you know, you're tripling that. But one thing that Quetico is known for is shorter portages. It's not like Algonquin where you got a 5-kilometer portage that you have to negotiate. So that was inviting as well. What we didn't realize was that some of the portages were going to be some challenges, you know, on those. So there was a laugh there. Somebody, yeah, that was you, Bill, right? Yeah, you know that. There's some of the, yeah. Well, we should have called you.
So we have a question.
So a little bit of
audience. Jeff Hamer asks, are canoes permitted on pontoons? Airplane pontoons, I guess.
They're not Canada used to allow 2 of them on a pontoon. They changed that regulation a long time ago. So you're now only allowed 1 canoe on it. And what they do is they are very conservative though when it comes to wind, because the wind can catch it on the pontoon. So they will only take it up to a certain level of wind gusting, and it's the reason why, as we're going to talk about, we ended up not being able to go in, you know, on the scheduled day. But yeah, they are allowed still, and hopefully that doesn't change. So, you know, when it comes to preparation, I think a lot of you would agree that there's a lot of excitement just in the planning of a trip, right? Putting things together, looking over maps, talking to people about it, and then you're getting into all the preparation, the food, and everything else that exists. So some of you may know that I'm a bit into the culinary world, and I do enjoy food. So some ideas of a few things. We got a new dehydrator in Excalibur, which I highly recommend this thing. So I got into making jerkies and ended up making some fabulous beef jerkies, pork jerky, salmon jerky. And then we did a bunch of dehydrated food. So the early part of the trip was going to be, you know, fresh food, but the latter part of it, we wanted to have some good dehydrated food. And it worked out very, very well in putting all of that together. So we're on our way up there, traveling up to Wawa and getting to our motel to go in there in the great metropolis of Wawa. And I didn't pick this one for the wine, even being wine and cheese here. By the way, it's a great rosé if you want it. But I actually threw this in because of the on your left of the screen there, the InReach Garmin. And you know, been doing tripping for a long time. Always been a map and compass guy, and you know, found again. But you know, this unit here is fabulous. And the reason I ended up getting it originally is because I was getting into more solo trips, and you know, being out there solo, you know, something ends up happening, you blow your knee out or something like that. It's nice to be able to have that connection so that you can get help if you do need it. So what I ended up doing is dropping a bunch of waypoints in at some of the portages, because as I said, the portages are not marked. So drop some waypoints in there. Also in some of the areas that the navigation might be a challenge through some waypoints down there, as well as some campsites. The other thing we set up as well was contact at home. So our son Tyler was going to be the principal contact. He had contact to the OPP as well as Quetico Park. We had a whole strategy of plan in place. You know, as I as you know, all of my a failure to plan is a plan of failure. So you always need to be planning all the time. So we sat there, and before we drank all that wine, Lisa got a full briefing on the use of it, just in case something happened to me on this thing.
So we have another question.
Sure.
How much did it cost for the fly-in?
It was around $1,000. We did a shuttle as well, so they did a short shuttle for us. So with the shuttle, I think it was just over $1,000 for the fly-in, which, you know, you probably get the Vancouver, you get Vancouver and back probably for that. It's not cheap, but it's well worth it. It was well worth it. And the way I look at it as well, you know, what would you spend if you went on a 1 week vacation somewhere, right? You're not getting a 1 week vacation for this type of money. And I also like the idea, especially in COVID, you know, supporting people in these types of things. And you know, supporting the economy. One of the neat things we did was cross the Arctic watershed, which I didn't know we were going to be doing until we came across this huge sign that was there, and everything flowing from that point ended up going up into the Arctic Ocean. Once we ended up going from there, we ended up getting to Quetico Park, and at Quetico, you have to go in and get your permit, and they require a briefing. And they started this, I think Lisa said about, not my Lisa, but Lisa from the park, about 4 years ago. And they're having a lot of problems with bears, you know, some of the sites not being, you know, properly taken care of and things like that. So once they started this briefing program, which takes about 10 or 15 minutes, they go through everything from, you know, safety to pooping in the woods, to, you know, making sure you take care of your food, to care of the campsites and all these types of things. And she said they've had a huge decline in problems, you know, with bears and everything else. So it's nice. I think it's something that all parks should do for wilderness tripping. And I think we'd be in a lot less trouble with some of the things that do happen out there, where people who are inexperienced and end up going into the wilderness. So we got to our Camp Quetico. This is the one that Lisa found. And it was absolutely a beautiful spot. It couldn't have worked out better for us. We had this huge place that was to ourselves. It was a place that we could get ourselves set up, you know, take all of our gear out, set up our food. It was right on the same lake that we were going to be flying off. We were flying off on the other side of it. And we were even given a beautiful sunset that night. So it just worked out as a beautiful thing to, you know, get us up next morning and to be out of there. However, I talked earlier on with some of the groups about being windbound, and it was windbound.
So our flight unfortunately didn't go. And we ended up having some time to kill. So we went back to the park center and stopped in at the store, bought some more t-shirts and a few more things, walked some of the trails around the car camping area. And then we headed into the big town of Atikokan. Their big social gathering place is Robin's Donuts. So we spent a few minutes there, and then we went into the XY paddle company. Doug had done a little research and found out that this paddle company was in Atikokan, and we met Spencer, who is now the craftsman, took over the business from his father. The father and his brother began making paddlers and thought they could do a better job of designing paddles. So they set up this company. The father, Don, and his brother Joe actually raced in the 1967 Centennial cross-country race. So it was a really interesting place to go. The paddles are beautiful, beautiful crafted paddles. really interesting talking to Spencer and hearing the history of the company. And then back we went at 6 o'clock that night to try again to do our fly-in. And again, there was a car shuttle. I waited at the airport, so to speak, the dock. And while I was there, I was leafing through the MacGuffin's book about Quetico. And there was a page where they mentioned meeting a ranger at the La Croix Ranger Station in Quetico. And they spent some time with him and his wife, and then 2 paddles as they left. And it turns out that those paddles were made by Joe's brother, Don, at XY Paddle Company. So it was kind of an interesting tie-in to our little day's event that I got to read about the MacGuffins and their fancy paddles that they got. So I was finished reading the whole Quetico book, and Doug came back from the car shuttle, and we looked at the lake again, and the pilot said, "I'm sorry, this is still too choppy. We're going to have to abort again and perhaps try again tomorrow morning."
So we ended up doing that, but just go back to these paddles. They're absolutely stunning paddles, and I've got the information, and he custom builds all of them, so they're all made to spec. But I'd love to get one of these things. I think I'm afraid to actually paddle with it though.
Christmas is coming.
It was just so beautiful. The other thing that Lisa mentioned about was that something,
Christmas
Gary?
is coming.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. Get that, Lisa?
Yeah.
Okay. So
So
Lisa mentioned about Robin's Donuts there, and they were telling us you got to go through the drive-through at Robin's. I said, "Why is that?" Just, well, it's not like going through Tim's where you say, "Tim Hortons, can I help you?" You say you go up to the drive-through and you go Robin's, and that's all you end up getting there. So we didn't do it though, but it would have been interesting to have done. So sure enough, we were up the next morning bright and early, and things were not looking good on that morning either. It was very choppy, but when we ended up getting there, the pilot was checking the weather because there were thunderstorms that were all over the place, and they have this way of tracking all of that, and he figured we could dodge them and get ourselves in there. So that looked very promising because we wanted to get in that day because it was starting to get to the point.
We had nothing else to do there.
Yeah, like you can only do so much Natticoke, and then you're out of it. So sure enough, we were off. Our flight was good, and we were going. So this plane, by the way, is a really interesting history on this aircraft. It was used by M&R for many years up in the north. It was the 5th de Havilland Beaver that was built, and it was built in 1948. So we were flying in a 72-year-old aircraft, and I was hoping that it had been well maintained over those 72 years. But you can take a look at the dash on this thing and the cockpit, and you think, wow, yeah, it looks like a 72-year-old aircraft. It performed incredibly well, though. Flying through Quetico, and we're up there for about half an hour, I guess it was. You look down, and it just all you see is this connection of lakes everywhere. We didn't see one canoeist out there at all. We ended up getting down into Cache Bay, and this area right here on the island where you see the Cache Bay Ranger Station. So people that would be coming up from the south, from the U.S., they would end up going in there and getting, they have to deal with immigration there as well, and they would end up coming into the Canadian side, so they get it all ahead of time and approved. So nobody was coming in. So this place was closed. We did see some canoeists though on the south side, and they were on the American side. So there were,
Yeah, we answered that.
Okay.
yeah, you're not muted there, Gary, just so you know.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, sorry.
So we saw that. We thought you really need actually just to paddle over to the American side, because it was only like we're within a kilometer of the American border. Maybe go over there and just say we crossed the American border and then carry on. Later, I'm glad we didn't, because later we found out the area is patrolled by drones, and so the Americans are not too happy about Canadians crossing the border, I guess. So probably had Tomahawk missiles or something like that on and getting vaporized. But it was neat that we're right on the border basically for the U.S. So we ended up getting into the into Cache Bay and into the ranger station. It was a very eerie feeling because normally this would be a fairly busy area. It was completely closed. So we took a look at the ranger station there. It was locked up, but you could see through the windows, and you could see in there that there's papers around and stuff like that. But it was locked up very tight. And so we got ourselves organized. All our gear got organized, and off we were to start our trip. So one of the things that's wonderful about Quetico is the number of pictographs that do exist. There's a whole book on all of the pictographs and all the areas that they do exist. And Cache Bay has one of the bigger ones on it. So we went around, we took that in, and then we started our trip to get out of Cache Bay. And getting out of Cache Bay, we were told by a little bit of times because it finally figured it out and got ourselves out of Cache Bay and into the first portage. When we were on one of our breakout rooms there was a discussion, I think, about gear and the amount of gear that you end up taking, you know, on a trip. So we take a lot of gear. So we ended up, I'll tell you our philosophy. I think everybody has a different tripping philosophy that exists. When we trip, and I've done other trips which are different, but for Lisa and I, we do view it as a vacation. So, you know, as a vacation, we want comforts. We bring, you know, good food. I bring my camera gear for all my photography. You know, we bring, you know, nice tent, shelter, and we bring some adult beverages as well. To go along. So we do fairly short in Quetico, so we didn't really have a concern. Plus, we had a canoe that you know, has great you know, volume to it, carry capacity. So it wasn't really an issue, and you know, we enjoy the comforts of that. So you know, we ended up having no issues with you know, traveling with that type of gear. The first portage is Silver Falls there, and we end up seeing, you know, umpteen falls on this trip. Very pretty, especially there's nobody around whatsoever. So this portage follows the falls to go through there. And one of the neat features on that portage are the old growth pines that are on it, just massive trees. And it's so nice to see that they escaped, you know, the loggers. So from there, we ended up carrying on up through the lake, and our intention was actually to carry on up through the falls chain, and just north of that, and then get into the falls chain and do the falls chain as a full day, and then come out in Atkins Bay in that area. So we take a full day to do that falls chain. So that was the plan that we ended up having out of the whole thing. So we decided to camp though before this short portage, and had a beautiful night, gorgeous dinner, and got up the next morning, got up reasonable time to start off the trip and start the portage.
So that was the start of day 2. We were heading for the full day of waterfalls and portages. The first portage, you'll possibly notice there, is curiously named Dead Man's Portage. And, you know, we wondered why. We'd done a little reading that talked about a steep rock face that we were to beware of. So we got to the rock face. We thought that was it and looked at it, and Doug was walking behind me and he slipped. So we figured, okay, maybe it's not so innocent. But Doug had the pack on. He was able to get up and carry on. We dropped our gear at the end and came back for the second load. And as we were coming back across this rock face, I slipped. And I went down with a giant thud on my back, on my tailbone. And I was lying there with thoughts flashing through my head. During our briefing, they had talked to us about emergency evacuations and said, it has to be a real emergency. So I'm laying there thinking, am I hurt? Can I move? Is this an emergency that would qualify for an evacuation? And I realized that no, it's not a true emergency. I can actually move. So Doug said, do you want to just lay there and rest for a minute? And I said, no, I think I better get up before I stiffen up. So I could move. I was up on my feet and realized that the only thing to do was move forward because we had to keep going to get out of there. So I was moving very slowly through the next little while. Lifting was difficult. Taking large steps on the portage trails was difficult, but we had no other choice but to carry on.
So Lisa soldiered on with it. The thing that I knew though is that we had a long way to go. We were in there for a lot of days, and we're also entering into a very challenging area, which was the falls chain. So we were slowed down significantly, you know, being a lot more cautious as well as we worked our way through. And we ended up at a nice lunch spot that so a full frame SLR with lenses, tripod, and everything else, just to you know, enjoy it, because I always like capturing the images where I can. So we had a nice lunch spot here. We took a long, slow lunch. I let Lisa rest a little bit, and then we managed to carry on from there. In carrying on, this is a map of the falls chain area. So we carried on down into the Four Falls portage. So that's lunch spot was just at the end of the Four Falls portages. So we carried on after that, and we got to Bald Rock Falls, and it says a portage, but it's actually more of a liftover. A pretty spot that is very void of trees and that type of thing. It's just a very pretty area. Made it through that, got the gear, you know, in the canoe, and then started paddling along. But all the time in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, we're going into an area where there's going to be multiple falls with portages and everything else. And Lisa has just gone through a fall. She's got an injury, and you know, maybe we should be smart about this, and we should see if we can find a place to stop. So I turned around and I looked back at the falls, which was so pretty. And then I looked off just to the side of the falls, and there was a campsite that was there. And I thought, okay, this is perfect. We're gonna take this thing. So we ended up taking the campsite, and I'll tell you, you know, what a great decision to do, because it ended up being one of the most spectacular spots that we have ever been on any trip. It was utterly breathtaking. So this is what we ended up with as a campsite. So this is the spot that we were, and this is right beside where the campsite is. This is a flat area out, and we're having our dinner and everything. We've got this site in front of us, and behind us we've got the sun setting. So it was just a remarkable spot to be. It also offered something else as well. It offers some sorry, this is our site here that we ended up having. And it also offered some hydrotherapy as well for Lisa, so that she could end up getting her back, take care. So I got in there as well. It was a nice little spot to get into. It was absolutely beautiful. We ended up getting an opportunity to sit there in the evening, play some cards, drink some nice beverages as well. It just turned out to be a spectacular opportunity. And had Lisa not fallen, we never would have stayed there. So thanks, honey. It was great that you had that fall. So it worked out very, very well for us. So we ended up having a beautiful fire that night, and enjoyed that. And then early and seeing if I can find sunrise, because as a photographer I like to see if I can capture the morning and evening light. And so I got up nice and early, and I was hoping that we'd be able to capture something. And it was a really bad storm through the night. It was shaking the tent, lightning, thunder, rain, everything through the night. So I wasn't expecting a lot, but it all cleared up just before sunrise. So I went out there to the same spot that I was showing you earlier, and this is what I ended up finding. I watched that sun come up over that waterfalls, and it was just one of those moments that just sticks into your mind, and you'll never forget it. It was just so beautiful. Plus the solitude that was attached to it, that there's nobody around anywhere at all. So we did have to leave there though. So we ended up getting out of there and worked our way down through the remainder of the falls chain. And here we came into some challenging portages the thing with the ports in Quetico is that they all seem to be wet and slippery. Everywhere you go, there's rocks that are covered in moss, and there's mud that's deep, and it's just, it's and you're always trying to, dodge around this stuff, but it seems to be just everywhere there. And there's times when we were being extra cautious as well because Lisa had fallen. We didn't want that to happen again, so we don't need more injuries. So when we came to a tricky spot, we were dropping the canoe, dropping the gear, and then we would lower it down, in steps. We'd be crossing, creeks, getting over slippery rock areas and stuff like that. So they were slower portages, even though it may only be a 400-meter portage. It's not like, a nice path in Algonquin that you end up taking. So, distance sometimes doesn't equate to the length of time a portage will end up, taking on things. But it was, the reason I threw this slide, and maybe you might want to talk about what this is, Lisa.
So early on in our canoeing days, I learned a trick to do with alfalfa sprouts. You start the sprouts in a margarine container prior to departure, a couple days prior, and rinse them twice daily. And by day 3, we had some fresh sprouts to have with our tuna sandwich.
Nice to have fresh stuff like that on a trip and things growing in your pack. Good things growing in your pack. So there's a lot of in and out, through the falls chain, obviously, because there's a lot of gear. And that's one of the things with having the extra gear. It's not as quick as what you would like it to be, perhaps. But we were also reminded of, some of the challenges that can happen, on a trip. And we were warned about this area. Fortunately, we weren't in high water times. But people who aren't careful, who don't know well, can easily get pulled into these types of things. And, this is a reminder that these types of things can end up happening. And the reason I put this slide in here is because of the campsites that are in Quetico. I mentioned earlier on that the briefings, are done to try to preserve the wilderness nature of the park. And you go on these campsites, and the only thing on them that you can identify that has had and shows that anyone has been there is a fire pit, and that's it. There's nothing else there. There's no garbage. There's no strings hanging. There are no nails in trees. There's no
makeshift tables.
Makeshift tables that are there. There's no lawn chairs that are left by people. So very, very different experience from what we've seen in some other parks. So we're so happy to see that. And even a lot of these fire pits, they have grass growing out of the things. Because they were hardly being used. They have 2,200 campsites in Quetico. There is I said there's no campsites that are marked and there are no maps that show up, but there is this site called Paddle Planner that does have sites that are put on by trippers. So they add them in here. It's an American site, but they do have Superior, they do have Quetico in there because of the connection to the Boundary Waters Park. So it was very helpful. We printed off stuff, even though sometimes, there'd be campsites showing on this and you wouldn't even, you couldn't even find them. So it's not something to rely on, that's for sure. So from there, we ended up getting onto Canoe, and we were on that big lake that you saw on the slide earlier on. And we ended up staying there. And that night, I knew that there was going to be a new moon. So I got myself out in the middle of the night. I didn't capture any images of it. It's a very, very challenging thing at night to do imagery like that. But I ended up just laying hours with no moon. Incredible to see that type of light in the sky, in the middle of the night. So from there, we were heading up Canoe, and this was our challenging lake to be able to get through as far as being open. And we paddled up there, and it wasn't a big problem to start with. It was about half to 2/3 of the way into it that we ended up hitting some winds and some challenges, on the water. And it's always a difficult call as to, when do you say, let's get to shore. This is a little bit too rough for us. When the water's, the boat's full of water, then yeah, the decision's made for you. But, being out there, we wanted to get our distance. So you're willing to hunker down to push it as long as it's not going over that threshold where, there's too much of a risk there. You're taking on water, but it worked. We were fine. And we were able to get it to the north there and enjoyed that, and said, it was pretty much behind us. So at the top of Count Nippy, there's a couple of portages to hit, and as I said, portages are not marked. So sometimes there's a little bit challenging to find. Even though I had some waypoints in there, you sometimes get out and go, where do you think this portage could be? So we were, sometimes it took a few minutes to, come up with the spot, or maybe 10 or 15 to figure out where it was. Always you find out where it is, and they say, oh yeah, that makes sense now. So there's no big yellow signs like you find in Algonquin. From there, we ended up getting up onto Montgomery Lake, and I had heard about some pictographs on this lake, and wanted to see, and I knew there was a campsite on the island that the pictographs were on as well. So when we got up there, we were fortunate. We did end up finding, not as spectacular as what was on Cache Bay, but we did end up capturing these. Some nice, we pulled around there, and things are not, you getting into a campsite, in most of the Quetico locations is a challenge, because there's a lot of rocks, trees down, everything else. So
where it looks like it's flat, it's actually slippery rocks.
yeah, so you gotta be careful. So it was a challenge to get out onto this campsite. When I went in myself, and I looked at it, and I saw that there was a beautiful area for a tent. And then I climbed up an embankment, and I got to the top of this embankment, and there was this flat area with a fire pit in it. And it was just the prettiest little spot that had a cliff at the edge of it. And you ended up,
Cliff.
yeah, this cliff, yes, this cliff. And so this is the top of it here. So where Lisa's back is that's a cliff that drops right down, and it's fair height that you're up there. A really pretty view from that location. Not really space up there to put a tent, but a great spot to have dinner and breakfast, and everything else. So we did have a visitor there as well, and he was looking upon us. Not sure how he got there, but he was hanging out while we were there. And as I said, we do enjoy the food. So this was something that Lisa had made. What was this one?
This is apple dumpling dessert. Dehydrated apples with cinnamon and sugar turned into a syrup, and then you drop dumplings in it. And I thought it was going to be way too much for both of us, but we managed to devour it.
We ate it, yeah. So that was the end of our night, and went down. We had a nice night's sleep, and again, I'm always looking for that morning light, and I ended up getting up early the next morning and going out and climbing up to our upper level part of our site. And as I got to the top of that, this is what I was given. So this was there, and I just looked, cannot beat that. So we ended up setting up our breakfast there, and so we just sat there looking at this beautiful mist and the sun coming through it, on this gorgeous little spot. And so we had a nice relaxing breakfast with multiple coffees along the way. So it was hard leaving that site. We took off out of there and ended up on our journey down. And we had a number of you have tripped with us, I think, before, maybe on the Grand or wherever, and you'll probably recognize this guy here. He's our little buddy. That's Ducky, and Ducky has traveled with us for 40 years now. And
like a hood ornament.
Yeah, he sits on the front of the canoe. He's always watching out for us, and we've had lots of great conversations with him. Our boys loved him. They would send him down waterfalls and go and find him and everything else. So it was he loved the trip, and we had a great time with Ducky on our trip. Carrying along from there, you can see the rocks at the top, which goes down and getting us into an area where there's a couple of rapids and falls. Now, one thing that happened here, though, is that we found it very offensive, and that was that we had solitude for 5 days. Then all of a sudden we came across somebody. It was like a weird thing just hitting you that there's an actual person. So as it turned out, the couple that we came across at a portage, and it was Have a Smoke Portage? Yeah, Have a Smoke
Portage.
Have a Smoke Portage. The couple that we came across was a couple that we had talked to at Camp Quetico 6 days earlier. So it was just a coincidence that we ended up, coming in contact with them. And going, from that location, we were going up to Elizabeth, and we had a nice campfire, and we had, I think, almost every every night we had a gorgeous sunset. I think this was the only night that we didn't have a great sunset. So we hit a little bit of rain that day. And I guess someone needed to make it rain because we ended up having to use our tarp because we carried it all that way. You better use the thing. I love these tarps. They're silicone tarp and they're so much better, you know, than the old nylon ones that we used to use. So we ended up enjoying an evening there. Everything was good, and on our way, you know, after that. So, you know, from there, we were working our way up into Bachawan Bay and going up to, and we did come across a couple of other people. There was a group that were in there that were from Toronto. They were supposed to be kayaking Vancouver Island. So they changed their trip, very similar scenario to us. There were some people that were in from Calgary that, you know, drove in to go in. So it was really neat talking to some of these people and listening to their stories of how COVID had changed, you know, their plans on things. Our intention was to get on Bay, and we had heard about some really nice campsites that were on some of the islands in here. Again, a bigger lake, but we were blessed with some really good weather, and we didn't have really much of a challenge getting up there. So we got there in good time, and it was great. It was a gorgeous site, and up to that point, we've been doing a lot of, you know, tripping. We were getting up early. We were, you know, packing up. We were going for the day. We didn't have a down day. We were hearing of other people having down days. At least it was saying, well, when's our down day? So there was no relaxation really. So I put this slide in because I had to show that actually Lisa did get to relax on this trip. She got 2 hours of relaxation out of the 8 days. So I figure that's reasonable, you know, for a canoe trip, right? So there she is, enjoying her but you didn't have your drink beside you, but you had that earlier on, right? So,
No, this wasn't 5 o'clock yet.
oh, right. We don't get to drink until 5 o'clock. Yeah, that's right. This spot had a gorgeous little area that we could set up for dinner and sit there and ultimately, you know, enjoy you know, a gorgeous sunset at the end of it all. So this was our last sunset, you know, for the trip. Later on, a beautiful crescent moon ended up coming out, and it just was a nice way to finish off the trip. But the trip wasn't really finished yet because we still had a couple of portages to do, and we had to get out the next day. And you know, Lisa had injured her back on the trip, and you know, we're always conscious of you know, what can happen, you know, tripping, you know, and we've known many people that have been evacuated, you know, from trips, you know, out there, lots of stories of it, and you know, I'm included in that. But that night, I ended up going into the tent, and I came out, and I've had some knee, you know, issues for many years from all the martial arts training I've done, and I've had a couple surgeries, and I had no issues up to that point with the trip. And all of a sudden, I came out and I stood up, and my right knee went on me, and it dropped me like a sack of hammers. I couldn't even move my leg, and I was just in incredible pain. So Lisa got me. There was no ice, but you got me a
bandana dipped in the cold lake.
Yeah, bandana on that. So got some on it, took some anti-inflammatories, things like that, and crossed my fingers and hoped that I wouldn't have any issue the next day. As it turned out, it was a bit of a challenge getting out, but made it out. Didn't have to do an evacuation. But I wanted to you know, go off on a little bit of a tangent here and talk about, you know, challenges in being out in the wilderness. And you know, when I was on the breakout rooms listening to all the various trips that people have done, you know, we have a love to go out into the wilderness. We want to be out there, and you know, we don't get younger. We carry on. You know, our bodies, you know, get aches and pains. You know, we got injuries here. And go, should I not go? You know, my shoulder's not very good right now. My knee's not doing well, or something like that. And you know, I'm not happy about the time that I'm going to end up having to say, you know, I can't make trips anymore. And I've canceled trips because of injuries. Everybody out there probably has canceled a trip because of an injury. But you know, we don't like doing that. We want to get out as much as we possibly can. A friend of mine, George Drought, many of you may have known George. George was a friend of mine, and he also was on the board with me back in the day. And he was out here paddling the Grand River with us several years ago. And he had been diagnosed with disease that ultimately ended up taking him. And I was sitting out on the back deck here with him and talking to him. And this is a guy who had traveled all through the Arctic. He's written books. He's done movies. He's been an outfitter entrenched in the outdoor world. And he sat there and he looked at me and said, you know what, Doug, my paddling days are over. And it just hit me like a hammer when he said that to me. And I thought, my God, here's a person who, has such a history and such a life, of in the wilderness. And so this is the end of that. And I think that day will come for me sometime, and it comes for all of us sometime. But for now, I think we just need to get out there as much as we possibly can. And to, with COVID, it's allowed for more opportunity for me. Anyways, I got away on 7 canoe trips. I've already got 2 winter sled trips booked, and I'm going to hopefully get a whole bunch more in for it. So my message to you is get out there, enjoy what we've got there in our wilderness. The last slide here is maybe in 2021 we might actually get there. Who knows? The way things are going, I'm not sure. Maybe we'll be in Quetico again. But anyways, thank you very much for.
We have one comment from the audience.
For your attention throughout all to Gary.
Thank you.
I'm just going to stop sharing here.
Okay. Doug, we have one comment from the audience, and it's Brent. Brent, can you feed into this conversation?
Oh, we just wanted to apologize. We're the people that you met on Have a Smoke Portage.
Oh, Brent! Wow!
Welcome.
How do you know about? Are you with the WCA?
We learned about it from you actually at Camp Quetico.
Oh, beautiful! Oh, Pat, well, welcome. That's great. Oh, that's superb. Super.
Yeah.
Super. Well,
Let's just bring it full circle.
Oh, that's this stuff.
Yeah.
You didn't say anything nasty about them.
So you guys had a great trip, I take it, did you?
We did, yeah. We had no excitement really. Yeah,
We can do a talk next year.
Perfect. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, that's really exciting that you came on board. You joined the WCA and being a part of that. That's great. So
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get it on a real trip with you guys.
Well, stick around.
Yeah, exactly.
We're doing breakout rooms again after.
Yeah, maybe Michaela, you can get us into the same breakout room when we break. Okay.
The same,
Yeah.
no,
If you
but
could-
breakout rooms, yes.
What's that? Yeah.
I can get you into breakout rooms. Can I get you into the same ones as before? No.
No.
Yeah,
Just
you can assign people, Michaela, under the breakout room thing. You can choose.
Yeah. I can do that again.
yeah. So assign Brent to our breakout room when we do that. Okay, just so we can connect with them.
So thank
Karen, do
you.
we have any other questions?
Sorry, Brent and who?
And us.
Brent Sinclair.
Who is up?
Doug and Lisa and Brent Sinclair.
Wave your hands and she'll find
Oh,
it. You got to go into
move
gallery
them
mode.
actually.
So Doug and Lisa, it's Bill and Joan, and thank you for the memories. Wonderful presentation.
Thank you for the notes that helped us.
Yes.
Question, when did the trip start? July, August, or?
It was
August.
August. It was August the 11th or?
We left here August the 11th. We didn't actually get in till the 14th, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it was neat. Anything else there, Gary, on our list?
No, I would just want to thank you. You know what I'm thinking? We could just leave it as a gallery view here, and people can drop off or ask more questions of you. And then everybody can hear the answers, right? So it's like a Q&A now. There was one question about where you started where did the flight drop you into?
So we started in Eva Lake, where the planes are, where they have that, and then we flew down to Cache Bay, so about 120 kilometers down there, and then we got dropped off at the ranger station in Cache Bay, where we started the trip.
Okay.
I was just going to add a comment. Sue Wiafedzi and myself and 6 others, we also did a Quetico trip. We had planned a far north trip and we ended up doing Quetico in the middle of July. We
Where did
also
you
found,
start?
we started at Camp Quetico
Oh,
and then just drove up the road, did Pickerel Lake and did a loop. But I was just going to echo your comments about Camp Quetico. They were saying ordinarily they would have 30 to 45 fishermen.
Yep.
I guess there were 6 of us on our trip. So
Yes.
it was a pretty special time for Quetico,
There
for
were a
Canadians.
couple of fishermen there when we were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful.
But it was very, very, very quiet, very, very quiet. And you know, and I think that's what made it so special as well, because there was no one around.
Right.
And, normally it would be just jammed, packed with all kinds of people, especially that time of the year.
And the Barry we picked, Barry was very helpful in helping refine our trip.
Yeah.
We did a bit of,
He was full of knowledge.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And a fisherman. We had some good walleye on our trip.
Oh, nice,
without-
nice.
With no more than an hour of fishing. So it was
Yeah.
pretty special.
Yeah,
You were on that one, Sue?
I was.
Beautiful.
It was a great trip.
Yeah, no, it's spectacular, spectacular area. Just absolutely love it.
And I highly recommend Camp Quetico. Highly recommend it. It's incredible. We
Yes, a couple
yeah,
times because
I didn't see her name. I can't
Yeah.
remember, but
right.
yeah, the food was well worth the small extra price.
Well, it didn't cost that much. It was amazingly cheap, I found.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were kind of afraid when we heard the price, what will we be getting? But there was nowhere else you would go anyway.
No, that's
It
right.
was-
Atacocan didn't have anything.
No, Robin's Donuts.
Robin's Donuts, yeah. And Surus Canoes.
yeah, we dropped in there.
Yeah.
I wanted to add a comment to Jones. First of all, I think Doug and Lisa have shown us why we all want to go out to the wilderness. I mean, it's to experience exact experience that they had and that they've shown us. But I also wanted to share a memory. Doug referred to, I think, a 1986 article, but I believe our Quetico trip was probably earlier than that. At any rate, the memory I'm sharing is of trying to teach my son, probably 10 or so, who is now a retired science teacher, map and compass navigation. And we decided that we would navigate across the last lake that we were going back to find the portage back to where we were going to. And we had worked it all out, taking a bearing from the map. And we're quite disappointed when we got to the spot where the map had shown the portage and it wasn't there. Anyway, we did eventually find the portage and subsequently learned that the map was wrong, and the actual fact that they had changed the portage to another spot. So there are lessons to be learned at all ages from this kind of experience.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, Bill. Definitely. And we did, you know, I think of all of our experiences with our 2 boys and now with our granddaughter as well, in sharing those experiences and taking them out. And you know, both Tyler and Rob have led trips now. And it's really neat to see it. I saw a picture of Tyler sitting making dinner, and I looked at the picture, and it was exactly set up the same way I do it. Everything was exactly the same, and I thought, wow, okay, you know, the apple doesn't fall very far, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, the other neat thing, if you're able to take your children with you, this son that Bill was just talking about, he graduated from Queen's in education, but he also had an extra year in outdoor education, and his whole teaching career, he had an outdoors club, and he took these high school students in the spring and the fall on trips. And you know what? That was his love, was these trips out canoeing with kids and teaching them. So it's wonderful what kids can pick up.
Yeah.
The neat thing with that is that those kids that had that contact, he may never know, the impact that he has had, but somewhere down the road, he'll talk about a teacher that they had that influenced them so much and, changed the course of their life, really. And that's a really neat thing. Really neat.
We have a couple of questions there.
Where?
Somebody asked about bugs. And no, we didn't encounter significant bugs at all.
Good for you.
Any did you use?
There's one about talking about the boat. You want to talk about the boat?
Oh, I sort of collect boats, I think, but I have the one that we use is a 17-foot Blue Water Freedom. I love that. I love that boat. I love the layup. It's light. It's it tracks incredibly well, and it's got great volume to it. So it's my favorite tripping which was my favorite. I had it totally restored recently, and my son's got that one now. But yeah, it was a Blue Water Freedom.
Oh, and I have to like the comment. It's always 5 o'clock somewhere. Oh, drones.
Yeah, there's a comment about drones not being allowed in provincial park. I don't think Trump abides by that one.
It's in the state park.
Yeah, it's in the state park, and there's drones that are meant to,
keep us out.
Keep us out. Yeah. Anything else, Gary, there that you're seeing?
Sorry, I was on mute. I think you've answered everything. If anybody has a question, just jump in when there's a pause. Oh, Sandro has a question.
I think I need more wine. Can you bring the wine over?
So Sandro's question is planning any trip for 2021. And
well, hopefully that Nahanni one goes. If the Nahanni one does not go, I don't know what we'll end up coming up with. I'm gonna be disappointed if Nahanni doesn't happen though. But that's the plan at this point out of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Your presentation made it sound as if you didn't have any rain at all.
It was very little rain.
We had a horrible storm the first night. It shook the tent. It's and a horrible storm the second night, but it was in the middle of the night.
So that doesn't count.
So it didn't count. And then we had a little bit of rain on that one day where we put up the fly, and that was it. Other than that, not a speck of rain. And
I think that rain was just before we ran into Brent and. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. The
Barry.
Brent and.
Yep.
Barry? So I think it was raining that day around the time that we met you.
Yeah, and other than that, just gorgeous sunsets, sunrises.
Yeah.